anyone who might be an Orthodox background, my Orthodox brothers and sisters, who believe in the Talmudic teachings and traditions, I would like to say before I begin that this video is not intended, or none of my videos that speak about the Talmud or anything to do with the subject. Never ever am I ever trying to make videos to upset the Orthodox community or to disrespect the Orthodox Jews, my brothers and sisters, in any way whatsoever. Never is my intention to hurt anyone or to anger anyone. So I just want to start by saying that because it's really important. This world is so full of negativity and division and fighting and nonsense, not bringing people together. What I'm trying to do with my videos is to bring people together, not to divide and to fight. Now, there are times in my videos for certain subjects that I have to be harsh because there's accusations being made upon the people of Israel, the Jewish people in particular, that are lies and blasphemy against God and His people, that are lies, nasty lies about our history. So yes, I get intense sometimes, and I might come off and rub someone the wrong way. Well, you know what? Sometimes tough love is what's needed. If you don't understand that what I mean and what I intend to do is to teach and educate and to help, then you're just not understanding or care to understand my message as a whole. But those of you who really know, who have watched several of my videos, know that I always intend to educate and to help people, not to harm or to divide, but bring people together. That being said, I want to speak about two subjects. The logical reasons why Karaites reject the oral law, the Talmudic teachings, the Mishnah, and the textual reasons, very briefly. Okay? So first, before examining textual reasons why Karaites or any Jews who have always throughout history rejected the Pharisaical traditions laid out in the Mishnah and the Talmud, it is important to understand that Karaites solely believe in the written Torah, nothing else, just what's written in the Hebrew Scriptures, that there was only one revelation. Now, Rabbinical Judaism believes there was two revelations. Now let's begin with the logical reasons why we reject the oral law. We. Not disrespect, not speaking against or to attack, but why we as Karaites stand by the written text of the Torah and the entire Tanakh, the Hebrew Scriptures. Let's start. Number one, throughout Tanakh, the Hebrew Scriptures, the word Torah, in the sense of the body of the divine revelation at Mount Sinai, is always in the singular. When it's speaking about the entire Torah, it's always in the singular. Always. Where the Mishnah, a genuine oral Torah, surely, speaking of the Mishnah, right, the oral Torah, the revelation claimed by the Pharisees that there was two revelations. There must be somewhere in the Torah where it explicitly says there are two Torahs, the written and the oral. Is this the case? Now, I will tell you with all honesty, no. There is not one single place clearly ever where it says that. And I hope I'm not offending anyone by saying this, but it must be said. There is not a single place. Now, there is an answer which you will get from the rabbinical side. They will say, no, there is. And I say, no, there is not explicit passage that says such a thing at all. Now, we're going to go into that because I'm going to go into what they will say in response to that. The Rabbinites, the Pharisaical Orthodox Jews, will specifically reverse what I'm saying and respond, and understandably so, will claim that there is two Torahs in the written Torah itself, spoken about. Yet the term Torah, when meaning collection of divine instruction, never appears in the plural in the entire Tanakh. This is true. All we read about in the Tanakh is a singular Torah of Moshe, of Moses. Never the Torahs, Torot in Hebrew, of Moshe. Now we're going to go deeper into this. Number two, throughout the 6 divisions of the Mishnah, there is a lack of the biblical formula. Now remember, we're dealing with the logical reasons we reject the oral Torah claim. Number 2 reason, for the logical, not scriptural, logical reason why, thinking-wise, think about it. This is why we reject the oral Torah claim. So number 2 is throughout the 6 divisions of the Mishnah, there is a lack of the biblical formula such as the words like so. And Yehovah spoke unto Moshe. Thus says Yehovah, or thus says Adonai, however you want to say. Thus says the Lord. We do not find this in any of the Mishnah whatsoever. What we do find is Rabbi so-and-so says in the name of Rabbi so-and-so, or Rabbi so-and-so in the name of Rabbi so-and-so disagrees. And there's disagreements, contradictions, they're speaking, arguing, disagreeing with each other. Okay? The Mishnah is thus clearly to Karaites the words of men. Now, is there knowledge, is there wisdom throughout the Mishnah, the Talmud in general? Yes, there is much wisdom, and there is much that we agree on with their interpretations, certain ones' interpretations. So no, you can't throw the baby with the bathwater, because there's a lot of things we do agree on because their interpretations are not always wrong. Now, anybody who says otherwise has never read the Mishnah, never studied it, never studied the Talmud, ever, because they could just boast and say there's nothing there. No, that's not true. Don't say that. You've never read the Talmud or the Mishnah, and if you did, you didn't read well enough if you say that there's nothing in there that's true. That, right off the bat, throws you out. Don't even post anything down below in the comment section for those of you who just have hatred towards the book of the Talmud, the Mishnah, the traditions, and just spew hatred and nonsense. Don't even comment, because I will erase your comments. You must respect every person and their beliefs. Now, what I'm stating is not to attack, okay? Now, I've studied these books very clearly, and there is much that we agree on, and much we disagree on. So we have to be choosy on what we say. If you don't know anything, don't talk about it. Number 3, the Tanakh reports that the written Torah was both lost and forgotten. This is very important. Think about this. It was lost and forgotten for 50 years. According to Tanakh, the Torah was lost for 50 years, okay? And only found by the temple priests 50 years later. You can find this story in 2 Kings chapter 22, verse 8, and 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verse 15. It is inconceivable, absolutely inconceivable, that an oral law, which is basically a secret translation, not written, oral, remembering my mind, secret translation, an oral law it's inconceivable that it could have been remembered when even the written Torah was lost for 50 years. This is illogical. Like I said, this is our logical response in rejection of the oral law. How could the Torah, the written Torah, be lost and found? And you still claim that there was 2 Torahs, the written and the oral. How could they remember the oral law if it wasn't written down? Again, this is a problem, especially since the oral law is dependent on the written law to derive its full meaning. Number 4, the rabbis claim that the oral law was given on Mount Sinai as the official interpretation of the Torah. Remember, what is claimed is that the Torah is like a skeleton. The Talmud, the Mishnah, and all the traditions are the meat and the blood to complete the skeleton, to put it together, the life of the Torah. Without the Mishnah, without the Talmudic teachings, the Torah is but a skeleton. It's just the headline of a newspaper, but the details, the article's missing. So it's just like looking at the headline. Oh, look, there was this and this happened. Where's the article? It's not there. Okay, well, without the article, we can't understand the Torah. That's what they claim. Okay? Yet if one actually looks at the Mishnah and the Talmud, they are full of opinions of rabbis who disagree with each other, like I mentioned earlier. Many disagreements on almost every single issue. Almost every single issue. I don't agree with this. I see it this way. Well, I see it like this, and I see it like that. Now, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing, okay? I'm not saying that people are going to agree on everything. We all have disagreements, okay? That's fine. It's fine. Of course, you're going to read the Talmud. Not everyone who's a Karaite agrees with every single thing. We have our disagreements. Of course, we're not in that much disagreement where people are literally contradicting completely one another. It's not the case. But the claim is that in the Mishnah, where they're having these discussions, these back and forths, that all of this, all of it, was inspired and given and interpreted from Mount Sinai, from God himself. That's the problem. It's not about disagreeing or interpretation or how to understand, how to keep the Torah. It's the problem with the contradictions, okay? Both opinions are told in rabbinical Judaism that both opinions, that they disagree, completely contradicting each other, that both are the words of the living God. Now this is the problem that a Karaite would have with these problems. That all the opinions, whether they agree or disagree, are coming from the living God. While it is possible for two learned teachers to reach different conclusions, which is absolutely true, it happens to myself and others. It's absolutely true. Reason dictates that at least one of them is wrong. Reason, logical reason, you can come to the conclusion someone's wrong. They can't both be right because they're both completely opposite. How can they both be right and they both be the words of God? That's not true. This can't be true. It's not logical. Karaites maintain that it is unreasonable. All sects of Israel believe it's unreasonable to believe that God would consistently contradict himself. So this is our response. Now let's go to the textual reasons why Karaites reject the oral law. The logical objections to the oral law, textually speaking. Okay? In the scriptures itself, for example, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 9 through 10 says, "Then Yehovah your God will make you most prosperous, for Yehovah will again rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you shall hearken to the voice of Yehovah your God, to keep his commandments which are written in this scroll of the Torah." Very, very clear. The words that are written in this scroll of Torah. It does not follow with, and also you must learn the teachings of the oral Torah to understand what I just stated here, what's in this scroll. Never ever does it say that. Number two, here's another textual problem. Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 9, "And Moshe wrote this Torah and delivered it unto the priests, sons of Levi." This Torah, it's an object. It's not something mental to be remembered. It's a physical object. This Torah. Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 11, "When all of Israel is come to appear before your God in the place which he shall choose, you shall read this Torah before all of Israel in their ears, in their hearing." Very, very clear. And again, every time something like this is said about the physical written Torah, it never continues by saying, "and then you will explain the oral Torah." It's not there. Okay? Number 4, Joshua chapter 1 verse 8. Please listen carefully. "This scroll of the Torah shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate therein day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it." Joshua chapter 8, verses 34 through 35. After that, he, Joshua, Yehoshua, read all the words of the Torah, the blessing and the curse, according to all that is written in the scroll of the Torah. There was not a word of all that Moshe had commanded, which Yehoshua, Joshua, did not read in the presence of the entire assembly of Israel, including the women, the children, and the strangers who accompanied them. I want to read it one more time. This is very important. This is, without question, the most explicit proof. After that, he, Joshua, please bear with me here. Listen. After that, he, Joshua, read all the words of the Torah, the blessing and the curse, according to all that is written in the scroll of the Torah. There was not a word of all that Moshe had commanded that Joshua did not read to everyone, all of Israel. This is the end of chapter 8. The end. It should have ended by saying, and then he explained the oral Torah. It's just not there. And I have several videos with many more passages like the ones I just read that make it problematic for us as Israel to accept that God gave two revelations at Mount Sinai, a written and an oral Torah. It's just not there clearly. What we do have, the passages that are used to prove the oral Torah, are not as strong as what I just stated here, which is just a handful, just about 4 passages. They use passages like when it says instructions, statutes, where it says Torot, instructions, plural, Torot, not Torah, Torot. They said, there's the oral Torah. And we say, no, excuse me, no. That is not proof for the oral law. What about the rest of it? The instructions, decrees, and statutes. What about those 2 sections? Was there 4 Torahs? Just 2? What about 3 and 4? Those are passages that are separate from the actual divine Torah, singular. Why only 2? What about 3 or 4? It's problematic. Karaites are not being rebellious. Now, what happens is in rabbinical Judaism, within the writings of the sages, oftentimes they are calling Karaites heretics, that they are rejecting. For example, there's a passage in the Talmud where it says, it's like a mockery of anyone who doesn't believe in the oral Torah. Again, it says, listen carefully, it says, behold, look, the wilderness in front of you. Look around you. Look at the wilderness. See the wilderness, like you're in the middle of the desert. Behold, the wilderness without the oral Torah. That's what they believe with all their hearts. That you're lost in the wilderness with nothing without the oral Torah. How do you know how to do this and that? How do you know? It's not explained. Again, it's because the focus of studying the whole Tanakh as a whole is rejected because they subconsciously, from the very start as children, are told that it's not in Tanakh. You must have the oral law to understand the Torah. Without it, you're just a lost heretic. You're like a person in the wilderness, lost. Just a free-for-all. Just do whatever you want. That's what they'll say. You just make up your own Torah. You just have your own oral Torahs then, because you just say, you do whatever you want, right? Isn't that your oral Torah? We hear that often. You Karaites have your own traditions, your own things. Again, no. Stop it. We do not have an oral Torah. We have traditions how to keep things. We never say that that came from Mount Sinai. That's a big claim. We do not have prayers that say, "Blessed art thou, King of the universe," commanding us to do it this way, as the Karaites do traditions. Or light the candles this way. That's the Karaite way. We don't do that. We do not claim that our traditions or how to keep the Torah came from Mount Sinai. That's the difference. And that's a very important detail. So it's explicit verses in the Torah itself throughout Tanakh that show that it's one Torah, the written Torah. And we must study the entire Tanakh to come up with answers of how to do things. And it's there. You must study carefully. We don't just invent passages. We don't just invent what to do and make up as we go. We follow explicit teaching. Real Karaites follow explicitly what Scripture talks about. And only Scripture. If we keep traditions, which we will get attacked for, well, why do you wear this? Why do you wear yarmulke? Doesn't that come from biblical Judaism? I choose to wear yarmulke. I chose not to today. I'm not against every single thing. Again, I'm not. We don't claim that that came from Sinai. I could wear a baseball cap. I could wear a Raiders cap. That's not in the Torah. Well, why are you wearing a baseball cap? Why are you wearing tennis shoes? Why are you wearing a jacket? Take off your jacket. Why are you wearing this shirt? Why do you have a watch? You have a Rolex on your wrist. Why do you have a ring on? It's not in the Torah. You see how stupid that gets? So, enough with the games. Was there one Torah or two? That's my point. And if it's only the written Torah, we must come back to the truth.